two teenagers from Manchester have been arrested in connection with an attack on a synagogue in Texas. A 44-year-old British man, Malik Faisal Akram, originally from Blackburn, was killed by a SWAT team after a 10-hour-long siege which saw 4 hostages taken. President Joe Biden called the incident an act of terror. Well, Akram reportedly demanded the freeing of a jailed Islamist jihadist in return for the release of worshippers. Well, my next guest is Sahal Ahmed, a reformed Islamist turned radicalisation commentator. Today, he drew attention to a Facebook post attributed to the Blackburn Muslim community. It offers condolences to the dead man's family while avoiding any condemnation of his actions and welcomes his arrival into, quote, the highest ranks of paradise. Sahal joins me here in the studio, I'm very pleased to say, and thanks for coming in, I really appreciate it. There's a lot here to get through. Let's start with this idea that the Blackburn Muslim community ought not to be posting something on Facebook, offering up their prayers and the hope that somebody will be taken into paradise.
Yeah, the optics on that one aren't very good. That's putting it mildly. But on the one hand, it makes sense. Someone's died and you're offering condolences, and it's a religious thing, right? Religious people just seek forgiveness for whoever it may be. But on the other hand, there's no condemnation of the acts of this individual. There's insinuation that somehow this person was innocent. And it just doesn't come across really well. And me, coming from the community, I know how a lot of members of the community think, and it's not right.
And it's important to call that out.
Yeah, it's important to call it out.
Do you think, I mean, community, you know, it's almost a joke, isn't it? The self-appointed community leader who speaks for nobody but their own ego. But we're not saying that here, are we?
No.
OK.
These are individual members who are, I'm assuming, I don't know who's running this Facebook post, but this group rather, but whoever it is better start thinking very carefully about what they write online. And also maybe perhaps they should think about what they think about terrorism, extremism, antisemitism, because, believe you me, the community has a lot of problems with antisemitism and condoning kind of violent behavior, as long as it aligns with their ideological views. It's just the right mess.
If this is condoning, it's condoning by omission. We ought to make that clear, but they're not condoning it, but nor are they condemning it either. Let's just talk about the individual, about whom we will find out more, but ultimately not in a court because he's dead. But he's 44. That's fairly elderly for a young, angry jihadist. I always find the cases of older jihadists slightly more unsettling. You hope that by your mid-40s, you've stopped being angry with the world. He clearly hadn't.
There's anger, and there's understandable anger, especially with the younger generation. But then, on the other hand, you can't just blame it all on a young person being angry and hot-blooded. It's also to do with the ideology, the Islamist ideology, and how that kind of comes from a particular interpretation of the texts, a very narrow and very literalist interpretation of the texts. And we need to start speaking more openly about these issues, because we just can't brush everything under the carpet, because one day, as happened here, there's just not going to be any room under the carpet to brush things under, and everything's going to spill out in the open. And that's not going to be good for the Muslim community.
I've lost count, I'm very sorry to say, of the number of terrorist jihadist attacks, both in this country and abroad, that I've stood close to the scene of. And I've noticed over the best part of 20 years an evolution in the way we, media, report these things. And one thing I observe, and it's certainly apparent today, is that quite often the argument's advanced that, oh, well, here was somebody with mental health problems, and doubtless in a proportion, perhaps a high proportion of the individual cases concerned, that is true. It's also true that sometimes it's a euphemism, and it's used, I think, as a smokescreen for somebody who is angry, but is adhering to and committed to, as you've already said, in their minds, coherent ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy to blame something like, oh, just this person's crazy. But in fact, when people studying, and sociologists and psychologists studying kind of terrorism have actually looked at it, it kind of turns out that actually the kind of clinically depressed or clinically mentally ill person is a lot less common than you would think. It's actually it's not some crazy person doing it. In fact, if you believe in the ideology that underpins Islamism, I would even say that because it's so full of conspiracy theory thinking, if you believe that Islam is literally under assault and you believe that the West is literally at war with Islam, it makes sense to be angry and then go and blow something up. Obviously, we know that that's not true at all. And for members of the Muslim community, especially people at the top, imams and preachers, and whether they be foreign-born or born here, to be kind of condoning conspiracist way of thinking and kind of talking about the Jews running the world and aasifa, siddiqui, the individual that this I don't know if he was mentally ill, but this person was trying to seek the release of. This aasifa siddiqui, it's a very well-known thing in the Muslim community. Everyone knows about her, and it's all about her being the victim, when in fact she's a convicted jihadist operative.
Yeah. So, Hel, we've got about 30 seconds left. I just want to praise you, actually, because, in the last hour we had Steve James, a doctor who stood out against the crowd and told his version, the modern phrase I believe is his truth, to the Health Secretary. You, along with people like Ed Hussein, many other former radicals who have walked away from that path, you must face a huge amount of, I'm guessing, intimidation, hatred. Tell me about it.
I get a lot of hatred, a lot of death threats. I get a lot of, I'm unsafe, essentially. But I'm not afraid. I mean, they can come at me. I'm genuinely not afraid. And I genuinely do believe in what I speak about. And I love my country. I love the people of this country. And I will do whatever it takes to serve my country.
You're a brave man. I'm going to shake your hand and say thank you for coming in. Thanks very much, Sahel. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.